president of the church in Winnetka. That's how you introduced yourself. And
Not 71.
I'm sorry, 61. 1961.
Oh, we were probably.
I'm glad you were alert.
Yeah.
For a while.
Our priest search.
In 1961, you made a call and you introduced yourself as the president of the new parish in Winnetka. That was your meeting for a while.
Were you starting another church, Leon? Were you in a different group?
Yeah, right. One of the early groups.
Yes, you were apparently on your search for a priest, and I felt that at the time I had been there too short of a time in Little Rock to leave them. I didn't think it would be fair to the group, so.
Well, thank you for your consideration at that time.
Actually, I said, no, actually my words were, let me think about it. And so 12 years later, I thought today is the 10th of February, 1985. We're just a few weeks away from completing 25 years when the charter was given to the parish to make it legal and was sanctioned by His Eminence Archbishop Yakovus. We do have various kinds of activities planned for the year, and in discussing this, Lee and I, we came up with the idea, let's capture the history on videotape. And let's have this opportunity, since we have actually all 7 of the original people who were in the naming of the church here, with one exception. Nick Manis was not able to be here, unfortunately, but everybody else is here. And I think that we should introduce ourselves and give John a chance to take a picture, to get the names of the people and their faces as we say them. So I'll just start over here on my left. We have Martha and Leon Scan, 25 years. Now, that's something you people are experts on, and not I. But I know, Jim, you were talking a little bit earlier about who met at your home, because I think it was at your home, wasn't it, that the...
Well, the first and formal meeting was held in my house.
But what happened prior to that, then?
Well, I don't know. There was a lot of talk about starting a church. I know at Ted Kamanis' house there was a party and they were talking about it there, and it was an idea whose time has come. As you know, right after the war, the suburbs in the Chicago area blossomed out, and a lot of Greek Americans started moving out here and started raising our families, and it was getting to be a little difficult going to Chicago to take your kids to Sunday school. So the idea, of course, was kind of spontaneous among everybody. And what happened is, finally I got to the point where I said to myself, well, let's see, we're going to do something. I got on the phone and I called up a few friends. I think I called Pete, was the first person I called, to meet at my house and just discuss it. And I think Peter then must have thought, I don't recall who was there that day. You were there too, right? You were there, Ted.
I was there.
And yeah, Tom.
Yeah.
And Nick Manis was there. I remember Nick. And we just sat around over a cup of coffee.
Before that, we met him. I think we had a party at your house, and then at a party at my house, and then when we just kept talking about it. And finally, you called the meeting and says, "Well, now let's stop talking about it. Let's start doing something about it."
Right.
But I think what's important too is that while these gatherings were taking place, everybody was out looking for recruits. Making contact with people that were known to us, to be of our faith and so forth. So I think that's how the ball began to roll.
No, I think that came after.
Oh.
That was after.
Well, that's why we're meeting, to dust off our memories.
But I can tell you when Wilmette, for example, and in Evanston, when these initial contacts took place, and there are people in this room who know that socially we're out trying to determine if there was a base of receptivity out there.
I like that legal language, base of receptivity.
From my perspective, I've always known Jim to be involved with the churches, even as a little boy with the Goiter and so forth. We had moved out here gotten married, moved out here with Kiki, and I represented Jim when he bought his first house in Morton Grove, and even at that time, he said, we have a church that he talking about churches right from the very beginning, right from the time that you moved into that house.
From 57, at least. Does anybody have recollection going back earlier than
Yes,
that?
I do.
Yes, it
Yes,
does.
Don't tell me, Don, when I first became engaged to Peter, he took me over to Mary and Jim's apartment, and they were just married. And I had never met Jim or Mary before. I don't think, we really didn't know each other. And Peter took me up there to introduce me to Jim and Mary because Peter and Jim were close friends, and also he represented Jim. And I went up there before we were married. And after we got to talking, not the first thing, but after that it was Jim who said, Kiki, as soon as you and Peter get married, and at that time we had plans to build this little home out in Glenview and so on, and he said, we're going to start a church. And with that, I thought, oh my goodness, what a responsibility. It was back then, and then they attended our wedding.
Excuse me, what year was that?
1956. Before Peter and I were married. That's how far back it goes. And I recall so definitely going up in your apartment. You had that apartment. And that's where Jim brought, and I came out and I said to Peter, my goodness, we aren't even married yet, and we're talking about, before that, 25 years later. I was really kind of, I was struck by it all.
So it took approximately 4 years from the time we started talking about it and working at it that it actually became a reality in the way of a
the truck.
church.
You didn't even know it.
What truck is that?
I don't know, you're gonna control the meeting, you answer the chair.
I'm gonna attempt it, Jim.
Oh, and I know you can. The way it, as I remember, in retrospect, of course, all of this is working, and as a matter of fact, there was a foursome 2 years before then, a group from St. James that thought, well, it would be practicable for us to start a church out here. I think Kiki and I, as perhaps the oldest, not in age, of course, but in having lived in the North Shore, we're isolated out here in what they knew at that time as the Edimia. You'd speak to the Greeks. You'd say, well, where do you live? And we say, we live in Wilmette, and we're out in the wilderness. But if you'll remember, it's true, we were a few small Greek families that lived in this area. But then Ted and I, who were colleagues together, and in those days we drove a truck or two, if you will. And surprising enough, it was 2 weeks before Christmas, as Tom Hampton will remember. That's in terms of, I knew that you had your action going. But then we had this Christmas party, and there were 12 couples, of which 7 thought it was a good idea, and the rest were kind of negative to it. And then Jim picked up the ball and really put the action there. In the interim, Ted and I were thinking how great it would be to have our children go to Sunday school, and ourselves, of course, have a church nearby. Because there was a time when folks like Kiki's family and our own would have to travel distances into the city.
Which Christmas?
What year would that be? If we are...
After we went to Tom,
There was a
at
series
least
of,
1 year.
when did we need to...
Was that 57, Jim?
It was the same summer that that Andy Athens came from Europe. Now, what year was that?
1959 that you
59.
baptized
That's when it,
Kathy. So it was...
By 1959, Jim, we were organized.
Yes.
We had the men's club, St. Peter Paul Men's Club.
Oh, on the contrary, no. Perhaps you had, but the point is, the time that Andy came, we already had the meeting at your house, and an actual structured men's club was there, so perhaps you're wrong.
Oh, well, it probably, he was going back, well, he came back from
Okay.
58.
That's
when it had
Tom
to
was
be.
first became involved.
Because Andy was gone at the time.
Right.
Well, tell
He
us
started
about
the first
Now,
meeting of the
Jim,
Women's Club in
excuse me,
58.
In
In
your
my
remember
backyard.
in the summer,
Sure, in 58, in my backyard, we
Yeah.
started the
with
the
all our
Lions
little
Club.
children, our
Yeah.
babies.
After we had the
Remember?
meeting at your house, you and I went as emissaries from this
That's
group
right. We went to
out
St.
to Mount,
John's.
yes, to
remember?
Mount Prospect, if you remember.
Yeah.
And it's there that they tried to court us into, well, move out our way, and we'd have a strong point in the center area, somewhere near the expressway where we can
Yeah,
take
but
care
at that
of folks.
time, what happened, at that time, though, they didn't have that property by the expressway. They
No.
had their property in
So they were
Arlington
sure.
Heights.
And they
we
wanted to
said,
put it
well,
out on Central
Anton
West.
was involved.
Pardon?
This fellow, Anton.
Nick
Yeah,
Anton.
Nick Anton, right. And he attended our
And he
first
came to-
formal meeting at
right.
Peter's house,
In fact,
remember?
at Peter's house, I remember
Yeah.
him vividly. Did he come
That's
with
right.
Manzoros at that time?
Yes, Manzoros was invited, and he brought along with him
Nick Anton?
Nick Anton and Peter Tutulis.
Peter
and,
Tutulis, the attorney.
We told him that it was our intention on that day to get a church going and get it started. Pick a provisional president, give it a name, start a Greek Orthodox community, and they wished that we would join them. They told us, as I recall, that they had $10,000 saved up some property, and we thanked them, declined, and they left, as I remember. Was it
Yeah, well, they
Yeah.
participated, if you remember, in some of the discussions. But I vividly remember when they were recommending to us that we name the church initially the North Shore Community Church. At that time, my blood pressure went up 200 points.
And you came up with the name we have today.
Jim
Yeah,
named
right.
the church.
Well, that was at Peter's house.
house,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that was at
Now, these are people from
Excuse me,
St.
let me say
John's, what is now St. John's.
Two
That's
I was
right,
referring to
St. John's.
Peter's house.
Right.
And last
Yeah,
year,
Mickey, I was there somewhere.
last year they celebrated their 25th anniversary, so they're one year ahead of us.
Right.
somehow.
They were a year and a half, and it was Mr. Anton, Nick was, he and Tutulis were the founders, and perhaps two or three others. They were very serious about us and thought that we would have a good potential. But
Well,
the
they were
distance was
inviting
too split.
everybody, like, I know I had been invited to go to, like, their women's club meeting at somebody's house. I had gone with Evelyn Demetrius, and I had been invited. And we went there and to one of the meetings, and they were trying to encourage us, to join there. In the meantime, we were, looking into getting started here.
They were anxious to have us not start a church here and join them. And I think we made it pretty clear at your house at that time, Peter.
House.
And at that, they were trying to influence us by the fact that if they did have some monies involved, we said, Peter. And we said, absolutely not. We need, it's too far west for us. We need a church here. That was the end of that.
So then we proceeded to pick a provisional president, Nick Manhouse, and other officers who I do not remember. And the names came up, and we had a variety of different names. We selected the name that Jim Coolidge George offered, St. Peter and Paul, in preference to the other names. And I was instructed to file formal article of incorporation, not as a church because we didn't have the authority, but I think as a St. Peter and Paul Men's Club in the beginning. Then it became St. Peter and Paul Community. Then it became St. Peter and Paul Church somewhere down as the years went by.
Jim, do you recall what prompted you to choose this particular?
I remember that he said.
Well-
I remember that he said that. None of the Orthodox, as a general rule, the Orthodox churches do not go to the ancient
To the original apostles.
apostles.
Well, I think what happens really, Peter, is in most Greek churches in the Chicago area, if you recall, we discussed this that particular night. We said one of the things we didn't want to see happen was to start
Yes.
some kind of a problem in trying to name the church and all these things like they do some of the other churches. Remember what they do in some places, if you buy the key to the church, you also have the right to name the church. And we said we don't want to get any of these hassles, so we decided we were going to name the church that night. We're going to make the bylaws. We would do everything before we invite other people.
That was the that was.
This way, it prevented any kind
I
of.
was
It was
under the impression
important.
that you were having a party at your home.
It was an
The
important.
discussions, that's when the name.
No,
That was a meeting.
It was a
St.
meeting.
Peter's.
It was a formal meeting.
You know what he really said? He told us that the epistles were the wives of the apostles.
Mike Bubata likes the show.
But it was an important
No, but
consideration
I felt-
that a person with a great deal of money would come in and
Yeah,
instead of church members.
That's right. That was one of our worries. We didn't want one person dominating our church like we had in the Chicago area at that time. You call it Assumption Church. We had
Be careful.
Well, yes, but you had one like they had Pierre Demet at St. Constantine. We had Coron Vilaz at Assumption. These people at St. Andrews, they had the Gregory family. Well, that was all right, but we didn't want that because we were all young people at that time, and what we wanted is to be all of us part of the group. That it was one big happy family. We didn't want one person to dominate. So that's why all these things were decided at the first formal meeting.
Yeah, but
And we thought, at least I thought, that the two foremost saints in our church were St. Peter and Paul. And that we had no allegiance to any local Greek church because we didn't come from Greece. We were all Greek Americans. We were all born here. And we all came from different parishes in the Chicago area, but we couldn't name them because we were too close. So we couldn't adopt that particular name, so we had to come up with a different name that was not in the Chicago area. And what best represents our church today is St. Peter and Paul, right? And this is what we selected.
When did this happen, Jim? I'm still confused.
At Peter's
And Kiki's house.
That-
The
What
first
year
meeting-
was it?
When?
When?
Yeah.
58,
I would say
57.
1958 or 1957.
Late
Late
1958.
57 or early 58, I think.
Was this?
I know there wasn't
the-
snow on the ground.
There wasn't?
No, it had to be spring or summer.
I wanted
Yeah, right.
to ask this question. You touched upon it a little bit. Was there one particular city parish from which most of your people came, or was it really a selection from different parishes?
Well, you can see just in this group here,
Yes.
I was
right?
from
Just in this
St.
group here
Constance.
I was from
From
the
St.
Holy
Connie's.
12 Apostles of Duluth.
in Duluth.
Minnesota.
Tom, where were you?
St. Andrews,
Tom
St.
Andrews?
Back and forth,
What
St.
parish you
Andrews.
were in, Tom?
I was in St. Constance.
Constantine and Helen. But you
I
were living
came-
out here.
Well, yes, you see, a great number of people moved up to the suburbs from the south side, from the west side, from Minnesota.
And you kept your allegiance.
Yeah, we met through
Yes.
a bottle of yours.
That's right, Manolos.
Right.
But you see, when we came up here, we found no church. And I said, "Afti after people menanastiri miati kana pa." It was awful. You know, yeti kiinitezo. We had fun. What concerned most of us, and I know particularly myself, all of a sudden, you know, it was convenient for the kids to go to. I lived in Winnetka at that time. Go to Winnetka Community Church, and others were going here and there and everywhere. In fact, that is one thing that I stress with the Archbishop, because shortly after we did this, then we had other problems, as we all know. And I arranged to meet the Archbishop. He was in for a function in the Palmer House. I shall never forget that. Because we were already having problems getting our charter. Principally St. Andrews they were vehemently against the church being started there.
And the reason for that?
Well, they just, it was a selfish reason, I believe.
Excuse, they were vehemently against losing parishioners.
Well, yes.
Let's be charitable.
Yeah,
They
right.
didn't see the wisdom.
No,
of,
they were
something like
vehemently,
that.
and they didn't want us to proselytize their members. I don't think that, because at that time, Father Andres, as well as the priest, Father Nestor, or Father Ebb, when
No,
at
Father Nestor.
Nestor and St. Demetrius were very cooperative as ministers, but they did not want us to go down there and proselytize their members.
Now, St. Andrews at that time was still at Winthrop Avenue, wasn't it?
No, they had
No,
moved.
Oh,
they had
They already moved?
They had already moved. But
Okay.
the difference was that St. Demetrius had many, many more members than they knew how to adequately handle, and I think they were more willing to see some of their members. You know, they didn't mind losing a few members.
Well, the physical distance between here and St. Demetrius and St. Andrews is considerable, isn't it?
You can travel, but we,
yeah,
that's
but,
probably.
And
looking at the
many of us
churches,
used to go. Many of us used to go to St. Demetrius. Anyway, we continued to go to St. Demetrius until we started Crow Island. Many of the parishioners that were in the early group were at St. Demetrius.
Well, I used to go to St. Andrews. I guess half would go one way, the other half the other way.
We should go back, if you don't mind, in just a moment as to the population trends.
up until the end of World War II, I could very safely say there was perhaps 25 or 30 Greek Orthodox type families in the north suburban area of Chicago, not including Skokie and Evanston. After World War II, it will astound you that there was a tremendous influx, as you'll remember. And this is when we became more aware of the fact that how isolated we were. And it's a fact we all went to the city for our spiritual needs. Now, what's really significant is that as this group began as initially a men's club, we did do some research. And if you'll remember, ladies and gentlemen, we had over 65% of the Orthodox Christians living in the north suburban area of Chicago did not attend any church. And it was a small 30 to 35% that did, in fact, make the trek into the city. Now, it was with that strength, then we started to meet with the hierarchy of the church and ask for charters. But I think the population trend was commensurate with the boom after World War II and our people moving out this way. It was a struggle up until that point. St. James did, in fact, hope to put a church in Skokie, but they didn't push it hard. And at that time, St. Andrews felt that we were part of their domain, and we should never forget that they had put all of their resources into building that beautiful new church on Hollywood and Sheridan Road in Chicago, so they had vested interest. They had to maintain that church, too. But isn't that, do you go along with me? Is that the trend?
They had just built that church then. They had a big mortgage, and they were worried about it.
Big problem.
Now, at that time, did the Eden Expressway exist?
Oh, yes.
After the war, it
did
was
exist.
built.
Yeah.
I think Eden's Expressway was opened in 1955 or 54.
I think so.
Up to that time, it just came up as far as Foster.
Boston.
Yeah, that's right.
And then I think like
Could you
say
describe
55.
John
the
wants-
environment around?
John wants a hold.
Yes, John.
I had a question. I've never heard of St. James before.
St.
St.
Demetrius.
Demetrius.
Oh,
We call it St. James. It's really the same
oh,
church.
okay.
We're sorry.
You're American,
Good.
you're a foreigner.
Good.
It is really St. Demetrius,
It
right?
really is.
Because I think of Jacobos with James now. That's what I've grown accustomed to. I see. Okay.
It should
Being
be,
from this area, we understand.
it should be brought out that following that meeting where the church was named, there were some other events, and a lot of other people became quickly involved. And we had, when we filed the charter for the St. Peter and Paul community, I can't remember very well. There were by that time maybe 25 or 30 persons who became charter members when we filed with the state. We should have those documents in the church. And that's when things really began to roll, and we made formal application. Leon was very much involved by that time, and we had a meeting. Then we have some kind of a meeting to
Clarify what fundamental objectives?
was that before or after we saw the Archbishop and received the charter?
Before we went to the Moraine
First-
Hotel in Highland
At the
Park.
Moraine?
Yeah.
First meeting I attended was the first meeting that was held at St. David's basement.
How about the
Yes, and it was during that summer, that we had the Moraine
But
Hotel
just a moment,
conference.
back up a bit.
No, no.
We must talk about how the trials and tribulations we went through to get this charter.
Charter.
That came a little after, Tom, if you remember.
No.
No.
Well, the
Why
first
don't
trials
you-
and tribulations
Remember when we made the
came
consummate,
and not getting
you got on
the,
your knees?
Yeah.
Yes, I remember that.
What was
Yeah, I was
that?
there,
All right,
Consulate.
yes, all right.
The Archbishop was
When
at the Greek consulate.
When we tried,
cornered him there.
I'll give it to you straight because I remember it vividly.
We went to
But before that, somebody said that somebody should talk to the Archbishop personally because we were not getting any response from the diocese or the archdiocese in getting our charter. The vice president of our company, his brother, Liatis, was an ambassador to the United States from Greece. And he happened to be here in Chicago for a HEPA function or CAPA function or something, and the Archbishop attended that. And I said to his brother who worked for us, could you arrange for me to have a meeting, an audience with the Archbishop to try to make him aware of it on a personal basis? I went up to the Palmer House, I remember that vividly, and talked for about 35 minutes on behalf of the group. Told him how important it was for us because many Greeks had migrated up here, notice I say, from the Chicago metro area. We needed a church. We were concerned about either people not going to church or beginning to send their children to other non-Orthodox churches. And he says, I'll take it under advisement. I said, we want to go forward because I was part of arranging for the use of Crow Island because I was the only one living in one at the time. My children were going there. So then, subsequent to that, we arranged a meeting with the Archbishop on March 25th in the consulate's office. And he was very busy with the festivities, and we got him into another room. And at that time,
Reminder,
yes,
we were told that he was at the Archdiocese, and that's where we went first.
right.
Then we found out where he was and ran down the
cornered him there.
We
I
forgot
They
about our
couldn't
meeting.
start their dinner.
I didn't want to
I
interrupt.
wasn't there, but they couldn't
he
start
really
their
had
Saint, wasn't
plans.
St. Andrews that was
No, he
having
had
a
not.
dinner or
That was
something?
So at that time,
And they
I
couldn't
remember
start the
vividly
dinner
because
because
church
he
were
wasn't
sitting
there.
here,
Had him like
that
2 hours late.
Peter got on his knees. He did. And he says, Your Eminence, all we're asking is to start a Greek Orthodox church. Because we had Father Hundress there. He was insisting that, well, I was a little curt. I remember him saying, well, we'll lose our business. I said, oh, churches are business. And then you got on your knees and you made a very impressive presentation. I remember that.
That's
Well,
called
but you have to understand that there were many of us there.
Yes, there were
And the
no
room was
worries.
very
You were
crowded.
there.
There were
You were there.
37 people there.
Yeah.
And it was snowing out.
That's right.
And we had been at a function ourselves, at some other function that we left. I don't remember what it was.
Well, furthermore,
And it became
We delayed the
we,
Yeah.
we delayed a 900-person banquet downtown that St. Demetrius was having
They were
because
upset.
we had tied up the Archbishop in this meeting. And furthermore, we had a big map of the North Suburban area of Chicago. We placed out, if I'll remember, Leanna and I put 200 or 300 buttons out there, and we had another 500 in the boxes, and we put them up there too. And our presentation was, Your Eminence, and we were speaking in the futures, of course, with the extra buttons. This is what we have now, and our potential is magnificent. And it was at that time that there was a breaking point, if you'll remember, that one of our parishioners said that, and I think it should come out here and not that it's a negative point. If you cannot accommodate us, then should we not consider the Albanian Orthodox Church? And that was a very difficult thing for us to even hear from our own member. Will you remember that?
We were going to go to the Patriarch of Alexandria.
And we had all types of suggestions, and the Archbishop...
Where did the Albanians come in?
No, we're talking about as an alternative. If I recall, it was Russia.
Was it a little mild
No,
bread?
Gus
Instead of
Dallas,
mild-
he was one of our better workers.
Good man.
Got mad and he got emotional. And of
What
course,
is this, Gus?
Yeah.
Gus
Dallas.
Dallas. He was one of the finest workers this community's had. And at that time, he was, very emotional. We had a lot of emotion going, folks. But that was the beauty of it all. We
That's why
moved in
Peter got on his
unison.
knees.
You had platoons of 7 cars moving these men from the Astor Street address down to the near north side in a 2-foot drifted snow conditions, and running in, and I mean virtually running into this gala event with the tails and the cocktails and the champagne, and saying, Your Eminence, we want to become Orthodox Christians, we need our church. And that was the most significant thing to me, is the emotion that prevailed, and it really built this church. We
Well,
were
when you
one
see Peter
unit.
on his knees, then you know it's
You know that.
That's
The shoes were wet.
Twice he did it in his lifetime.
There was no place to
I
put
think you skipped an awful lot.
Well, was Peter on his knees
Yeah.
before he became a judge or after?
I don't remember much before.
And I'll tell you, during that time, the women were all home. I remember sitting by that telephone,
Oh,
and
yeah.
wondering wondering, and then we had this chain, what was
We
it,
were all
12?
calling one another.
12 or 1 o'clock in the morning, whatever, we just sat there, and then we just picked up the telephone after somebody got one call, the other call, and,
I think,
The Archbishop was impressed.
yeah.
it was an occasion where both sides had the opportunity to present their points of view. St. Andrews was represented by Mr. Marks, who gave the point of view of St. Andrews, which the Archbishop also had to consider. But in the end, we were Orthodox.
I think that was a critical moment, but I think that we've got to, I don't think we should overlook the fact that we were well on our way to being a church before that all happened. And we weren't so much worried about getting certification as we were becoming, starting a Sunday school, starting a church. We already had this part-time priest, and all of these things were underway because, and I think strategically we're in pretty good shape because we were in business.
We had the we had the Sunday school before.
Remember, we went around and got petitions signed.
Right,
We
we
had a
had
whole list of people's names.
and the Archbishop. That wasn't the first time he had. He had known. They knew about us.
Oh, of
being
course he
existence
did.
long
that was
before
the
that
meeting that did
because
it.
they knew that we were starting the Sunday school.
Excuse me, people, I have to caution one thing. The microphone will pick up everybody talking at once, in which case it'll be garbled.
You mean this is being recorded too?
Oh,
Yes,
this,
of course.
haven't you heard about, we're on the slide on that movie here.
I thought you were taking pictures, that's all.
Leon,
Everything I say I want
But
erased.
excuse me,
How long
we
do you
were
think
we
you
had
had-
started. I think we'd started the Sunday school. When did you get permission to go to Crow Island?
That was
Was it in '58?
I think a whole year we had
58.
Sunday school.
yes, it was
Okay.
58.
Explain
we
what
wanted-
Crow Island is, because it's...
Crow Island Grammar School
Okay.
in Winnetka. Because and we wanted to go to Crow Island because we wanted to start a Sunday school, and we had started in '58 to correspond with the Archdiocese to ask them for material. That's when Smirls was
Yeah.
doing that, to ask them for materials for the Sunday school. So that was '58, and we must have had 150, 200 kids in that Sunday school.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we had a
I
lot.
don't
That was
more.
before
I love
we
it.
ever started to approach them, and I think that's the strategy that strategy worked because we were well underway and in business when before that meeting at the consulate in '60.
Well, Leon,
And then
the children met for Sunday school and there was no worship service.
no,
It was
Oh,
just
that's
a-
something else.
Then then we had structured a worship service, and all the adults came into a worship class, and then we said our prayers, we read the gospel,
Interpreted.
and then someone took turns giving a lecture. We lectured about almost everything.
No
Really?
priest was present.
No priest was
No.
present.
Had you put in a request
We
for
had-
a priest?
Well, I don't really, no, not yet. No, we haven't.
You
But-
simply were conducting your own
Sure.
Well, Bible
worship
class.
service, your own
No,
church
no, it
school.
wasn't,
It was
it
not a worship
wasn't a
service.
worship service, no.
I could give you the,
Yeah,
give
and
the
the
outline
lecture
of it,
things
because
were
we
like
have the outline.
even
You have
on
an outline.
architecture and
Before we
music.
go into that, can I tell you is an interesting story? I'm not so sure it should be recorded. When I tried to get the village of Winnetka to give us permission to use the school, at that time there were two people I believe that lived in Winnetka, and he was not yet involved. It was Katsaroulis and George and myself. I went there, and the first thing they said, Greek Orthodox. I said, Jewish Orthodox. You know, they had no idea what a Greek Orthodox church was. These stave, well, I should say, us were kind of looking at me rather funny. And
North Shore Anglo-Saxon.
they wanted to know how many Greek Orthodox people lived in Winnetka. Now, you know, we were all spread through Wilmette, Morton Grove, and, well, I must admit, I said a little white lie. He says, the preponderance of the people, are you saying,
trying to put words in their mouth, because if I said two families, I'm sure that, I says, oh yes, the preponderance are Winnetka and
The community
North
that would
Shore.
be prejudiced.
North Shore. So,
The school system.
in fact, I was a little concerned whether they would give us permission to use the school, because it was the first time that the village of Winnetka ever gave a religious group permission to use a school.
And that was accomplished with only 2 Orthodox families in Winnetka, and only 1 really involved in the church.
Actually, there were several more, but they weren't involved with our church.
I see.
Yeah, there were a few other
there was
people,
that.
but I didn't even know that.
They were most accommodating.
Well,
Oh,
can
we
I-
had the best
Can I have the floor
facilities.
back a second, Mr.
Yeah.
Chairman?
Yeah.
I think out where,
Okay.
because I think it's important that there was that we realized there was a lot going on before we actually confronted the Archbishop and said we need to have our certificate. There's a lot going on because the Sunday school was extremely active at that time. And as was pointed out, we were having these, we call them adult education sessions. And in fact here in the Hotel Marine minutes, we say, however, we should get a priest as soon as possible. However, we should operate the Sunday morning sessions for the adults along the lines of a Bible class. The program shall include a reading and discussion of the epistle and the gospel. Appoint a program chairman for each meeting. Purchase books of gospels in English. Suggested outline of program: opening prayer, hymn, epistle, and gospel with discussion. Hymn, sermon, religious and non-religious, hymn, and closing prayer. And that's what we did while the young people were in Sunday school. And we continued that. And then it seems to me there was one special occasion that we felt that we should have a service and allow our children to have communion. Was it Easter?
First Easter, yes it was.
So we asked for a priest, and I don't recall who it was, but we called
I think it was
Other
Petra.
Petra.
Was he the
That
one
was
and we
yeah,
had our
right.
first service there.
At the
was
Wilmette
retired.
Women's
At the
Club.
Wilmette Women's Club.
Another
That was our
Petra.
first religious service.
And we had
And
pancake
Father
breakfast.
Petrus, you're right. That's
No,
when
that was
Father.
not at the Wilmette Women's Club. That was at the Masonic Temple. I remember.
Oh,
my
it was
brother
the
the
Masonic
Okay,
Temple?
well, Masonic
Okay.
Wilmette
Temple.
Masonic
Yeah,
Temple.
Masonic
And
Temple.
that's when Father Petrus came out, and that's how we found Father
The
Petrus.
Masonic Temple still here.
Yes,
In
indeed, it
Wilmette.
is, yeah.
In Wilmette.
In Wilmette.
And that was the first religious
That
service
was
you
the
had.
first religious service. That
Yeah.
must have been 58 or 59.
But we didn't even have it sanctioned by the
No,
archdiocese
not by
at
that
that
time.
No.
We did, in their eyes, we were conducting a church at least.
We had outstanding chanters.
Well, I'm happy to tell you that the reputation that you started in 1959 continues.
Today. Well, I'll be happy to tell you furthermore, we almost had a setback because it was at that time Tomatis was the altar boy and the choir at one time.
Oh, he was the chanter, remember?
Well, he
Yeah,
was
but
an
that-
altar boy, but
Wasn't it after that, though,
Salties.
that Father Petrus made an arrangement with us to come out every Sunday?
Yeah.
We used to go to
Yeah.
Long time
Well,
ago.
I like Crow Island School. I like to point out something, if I may. I remember conducting some of these Sunday morning programs, and I remember inviting my kumbaya out, Andy Copeland. He came out a couple of Sundays and talked to us. Remember?
Yes.
And one Sunday, WGN TV had St. Andrew's on church, the Divine Liturgy. And remember, we had the TV in his room, and we all participated in the Divine Liturgy by looking at TV. That was about
It was
61.
That was about
61.
But it was prior to 60 that we started
And I remember,
having services on Sunday with
Yeah.
Father Petrus.
Yeah.
Where did you get Father Petrobus from? If you say it was not legal, wasn't he attached to a church?
Illegal.
He was
He's
retired.
retired.
He was
Retired.
retired.
Oh, he was
we called
retired.
it
He
a
was
bishop
retired.
will send him over. He was
Yeah.
a traveling
Yeah.
priest.
No, actually, the bishop.
Was it
We
didn't
found
know that,
out,
but-
we found out that he had been retired. He was ill. I think he prematurely
and before
retired.
the charter, I recall, and we have a movie film of it, we had our first picnic and outdoor religious service down on the lake in no man's land.
Do you have
in
that
Wilmette.
film?
I have that film.
How long
Father
is it?
Petrobus,
Maybe-
Father Petrobus presided, and everybody who was here was in that film.
Was that the year of the infamous raffle?
It was so successful
no.
for all our guests that we ran out of gifts because the man that sold us the raffle setup you know, so many numbers per bowl had voted at 80%.
He was a winner.
By 2:30, we had consumed, all the gifts were gone. Everyone was so excited, and they weren't the members because we didn't have time to buy anything, so they were the guests, and we did almost go broke on that.
And then the committee was worried that,
The church was
Father
the first time they tried to take advantage of it.
But there's another interesting thing that we should remember is that Father, we had Harry Villeneuve, who really made one of the first, another major contribution here.
And
as
he
a
was your
chanter.
chanter. And how did you contact him? Where was he
Well, he
from?
was some
Probably
retired
was retired.
salty
too, huh?
from the west side, and probably one of the best. And
He used to play his own organ, didn't he, as he played?
No.
He played,
He had no
at the
notion.
Chemises he did play the
Oh,
organ, and
really?
he sang along with
Well,
himself.
he used to come out every Sunday morning, and we used to pick him up at the corner of Central.
when
And
Father
Foster.
Petrovich
And
came,
with
that's
Father
when,
Petrovich.
yeah, they came
Right.
together.
I think I'd like to say that on that outdoor affair, that was Kurt Lulius, who was running a concession
Your brother-in-law.
beach at that time,
Yeah.
Kiki's brother, and I think he's the one that
Lakota
arranged
Beach
and let us
stuff,
use the
right?
beach and so forth.
Was it called Lakota?
Well,
Are we going back to the fact now, when did we have the first Easter service? It was with Petrovus. Was that before we had the charter?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
We
well,
did not
I'd
have
really
that.
like to have it recorded how we did that service, because, you know, you have to remember that, aside from the men, there were women involved in this beginnings of the church.
that's why we invited you
And,
here, to make sure that your voices were heard.
The gentleman really did take care of all the details and the business and the functions of the church proper, but it was the women really who, I mean, we had all the headaches as to preparation
In the Sunday
in the
school,
Sunday
and all part of
school
Sunday
and
school.
such to get started. And when we came, the facilities at Crow Island were just beautiful. And I'll have to say that most of the women at that time who were involved, except maybe for Mary, who was oriented quite a bit from Jim, we really didn't know an awful lot about beginnings of Sunday school and curriculums, and most of us had backgrounds in areas like that at that time. You know, but really we had, and Jim came in, Smirlis came in, we really had to do a lot of research. And I remember the first women who started and were working in these particular areas, like
We
Connie
met at
Photos,
Angie Kavuris'
Angie
house,
Kavuris,
a whole bunch of women.
Ann
and Jim.
Kradicus, all of them, they really had to research. And all our children who went into Sunday school at that time and in that particular area, they learned an awful lot, because these women worked very hard. Dedicated to, to really teaching the Greek Orthodox religion and faith. Then we came to Easter at that time, and if you don't think, we always had anxious moments because we had nothing to work with. And we needed a table, and remember my cousin Kay Fakeless made the first altar cloth. And she made the first altar cloth at that
And Jim
time.
Carter's made the first altar.
The table.
Now, wait a minute, the table,
Yeah,
right.
the
Now,
table.
when it came time to do the epitaph, we were really wondering how we were gonna work this out. I'll never forget this. This is something that we always, I'll never forget it, because Estelle Bergadon and Nick Bergadon at that time were in the flower business. And, we didn't know how to make this epitaphio, so, someone cut a piece of wood, and we got coat hangers, and it was Estelle's innovative idea that she shaped these coat hangers and put them on this piece of wood, and we covered, shaped like an epitaphio is what happened, and then they brought their flowers and donated them, and we made the epitaphio at that time, and it was that way. And it was, and when we took it in there, we told Father Petrovus and to the gentleman, please don't carry it. You can't take it around because it was swerving from one place to another. It was very difficult. Well, Father Petrovus was emotionally taken up that when he saw this, he was crying through half the service, and he couldn't stand it. It had to go around. So I don't know how reverent we were because we were watching it go around, you know, and we didn't know how many people we were going to have there. Remember that? And it was packed. We had a full, assembly.
That was in the gymnasium.
In the auditorium. Right.
This all took place before we had our
That was
certification.
before we had our certification. I'll never forget though, there has never been to us a more beautiful.
That's why I wanted to go back,
Right.
because see, this all transpired before we ever got our certificate.
Yeah.
So you
And we
people
had
actually
at that
were
time,
operating.
remember?
You people were all
Yeah.
organized without the leadership
Yes,
of the priest.
absolutely.
You were carrying on church, school,
Yeah.
That's right.
and other activities without the leadership of the
That's
priest.
right.
And you went out and you found your own priest who was retired.
That's
Right.
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 That's why I tell
You
you
might
that
call
you-
us a bootleg church.
Now, one thing.
Father, excuse me, but what I'd like to say is this is exactly why I'm saying to you, Father, that the people who were involved, including the gentlemen and the ladies at that time, they had to research because we were really not that well informed. So you really have to know that when the services went on and when these Sunday schools went on, I'll never get my children in there. They were in there from 3 years old because we didn't think we had enough people in the Sunday schools. And they were very well, these women did an excellent job in researching Greek Orthodox.
Father Nestor was the one. See, Jim would
That's
go
right.
down. Jim Smirls would go down to Ayudimitri.
Yes.
And
Material.
Father Nestor spent hours with him, giving him material and really guiding him. And then he in turn would come and we would have meetings and sit down, run off stuff. And so really, as far as the organization of the Sunday school, we really should offer a lot of thanks to Father Nestor because
That's right.
he was the one who
St.
really
Demetrius helped you get started. St.
tremendously.
Andrews was not a big
tremendously.
help.
They
I have a
didn't
question.
they didn't try to
Yeah.
hamper us.
You know,
No.
I mean, in fairness, Father, because I remember I used to go down and visit with Father Hunters very, very often and ask his advice about should we do this, should we do that, and how do you handle your board, and these kinds of things. They really didn't.
But he was opposed to
Yeah.
Oh,
He was
wow.
It was very difficult for him not to help.
In the
No priest could.
diocese, in the archdiocese, he was not helping us.
Well, but I just wanted to say, I recall that time rather vividly because, as we pointed out here, the Sunday school, the related activities of the organization were in effect. Yet there was dalliance, I guess, on the part of the archdiocese in recognizing the group, and I think we were coming to a point. Had the experience that we had in terms of meeting the Archbishop, at downtown on that occasion, if that had been prolonged or had not occurred, that some began to think in terms of what's the alternative.
We had
In-
considered.
What?
We had considered.
Can I point something out? You may not be aware, as a priest would be aware, of the situation at the Archdiocese at that particular time. Archbishop Michael was the Archbishop here from 1950 until July of 1957. Excuse me, 58. He died in 1958. And there was a situation that occurred in Constantinople where the metropolitans wanted a certain person to be appointed here as the archbishop. Patriarch Athenagoras wanted Jacobus to be appointed here. And he couldn't do anything without the approval of the metropolitans. The metropolitans couldn't do anything without his approval either. So there was a period of time from July of 1958 until March of 1959 when there was no archbishop. There was the acting archbishop who happened to be, I think, Bishop, the current metropolitan, Germanos.
Yeah.
And usually those people who are waiting to be replaced don't take definitive actions in anything because they figure any day they're going to be replaced, and why should they burden the next person with their decision? So this dragged out until March of 1959. And the Archbishop came to the United States and was enthroned. He was supposed to be enthroned on the 1st of April, and the vote was delayed, and so he was enthroned the 2nd. So he was a brand new Archbishop. And that may account for some of the delays in the action on your petition to be recognized.
I believe that could be partially true.
Partially.
But I think one of the main things, while he did try to guide us, was the opposition we had from St. Andrews.
Yes, we had in paper the letters. I've seen the letters where he writes to you, and he speaks from that point of view. Yes, Vegetarian.
Well, I think maybe my question was partially answered. I wondered if the way you started out by being an active group, conducting Sunday school and adult religious education, even having the priest come out prior to being chartered, was due to the reason that you had not been granted a charter when you asked for it, or was it your style of organization?
I think we wanted a church. We wanted a church, and I don't think we were going to hold up on doing the things that we thought we had to do, waiting to get approval.
Do you recall who the bishop was at the time? Was it Bishop
I
Emilianos?
think so.
That's what I think. I think in the back of our minds we wanted to be chartered, but I don't think we were about to stop being a church because we hadn't received our charter.
But I think that if we're recording, there was an element of which suggested that the time maybe had come for an American Orthodox church. Not.
You mean, was that part of the spirit?
No, the spirit was very much, as I remember it, was very much within the confines of the existing church. I think people were motivated not by desires or any motivation to break away. I think they were very much involved in perpetuating the church that they knew, the Greek Orthodox Church. But I think that there were some who speculated ahead to possibly the time when the interests of remaining with the existing organization, that the compatibility may no longer exist and possibly go off, the time would come to go off in a different direction. And it sure looked like the time, maybe was arriving because of the delays and the roadblocks that were being thrown in the path of this group, which caused some discussion to surface, and which, quickly dissipated after the charter came and so on and so forth. But I think a thought that still remains, I think, in some quarters. What?
So much fulfillment just from having services and having Sunday school that the group was not about to slow down because they didn't have a charter.
There was frustration
and I think
in
that
not
the first
getting the charter.
And I think that we did discuss going to maybe we were saying it jokingly, but we were going to go to the Patriarchate of Alexander. We felt that Constantine didn't want us. Well, we'd go elsewhere.
But it was also at that time that it wasn't either the Serbs or the Russians or what have you broke away from their existing structure. Was it the Serbians, and formed then the initial American Orthodox Church?
It may have been in the late 50s or
someplace in there.
Yeah, we talked about it, never.
No, we never.
I didn't say we did, but what would have happened? In my mind, was the question: what would have happened if we didn't get a charter?
No,
I think we just kept going.
it was,
We would have just
you
kept
have-
going. It was
we
an
didn't,
idea which came and you can't stop it.
Without a priest?
Eventually, they had to give
We
it.
had a
Remember what we were doing at that time, though? We were getting all our archdiocesan material from them. We were sending to New York and getting all the Sunday school material.
Right.
I mean, you're ordering 200 books. What are they going to do?
Speaker, I also want to remind you that it wasn't just Father Petrus, because when Petrus, there was one time when you remember we had to send him back to Greece because his son was sick or something.
Yeah.
But we had, there was another retired priest here in Skokie, a very, very fine elderly gentleman that lived on Golf or Dempster, remember?
Yeah, I don't
Who
remember.
came out a couple of Sundays. Okay. Then then we would go all the way down to St. Constantine and bring Father Byron up, who was the second priest.
Wasn't that after we got our charter?
It was the young folk, the real young folk.
That was after we got our charter, and the bishop
But I
would
don't think it made
assign.
that much difference to
I think that we didn't get into all of these intellectual
No.
arguments about the structure of the church. I think we have to remember that we were all inexperienced, especially along those lines, and we were just moving along according to where our instincts were taking us. And momentum took hold, and we made our own mistakes and blunders as well. And sometimes we didn't understand what was going on above us with the superiors of the church, but it was just the events transpired so that everything came together in a successful conclusion.
Well, all of you were either your late 20s or early 30s at that time. You were all newly married. You were all had very small children. They were families were being formed. You really were filled with energy, the prime of,
Sure.
you really had a lot of ambition and drive.
And we shouldn't forget these adversities were probably what propelled this group. There was never a question in my mind that we were a church. And never did it ever occur to me that I would not adhere to the archdiocese, knowing that one day we would get it. I think that was the spirit. We knew one day we were justified and we would be recognized.
You were the irresistible
by
force.
this archdiocese. And it's true.
There's
And
certain things you can't say.
Now, all of you were American-born people of Greek ancestry.
I don't know. Is that true?
Well, all of you people here
Well,
are.
here, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Except for my wife.
She was born in good.
Well,
She was born in Greece.
Well, that's what.
Born in Tripoli.
Oh, you didn't want that vote?
I didn't know that.
But as early
That's
as
right, she was born in
60,
Italy.
Father, as early as the Marine Conference was had here in February of 60, we were talking about getting a permanent priest.
Yes,
So when we
no
start
doubt.
talking about
No.
a permanent priest, that's probably when we started coming more and more into conflict with the archdiocese, because we knew that's where you had to go to get a permanent priest assigned.
You really should go back just a little bit and talk about the adversities of getting members way back.
What
I mean, when we
adversities?
started, when this all began with the gentlemen and ladies, don't forget, we had to sell people on the fact that we really were going to start a church. You don't think that we didn't pick up the phone book and such and just look down Greek names and call up and have people to slam the phone down on us. It wasn't. We had to prove ourselves.
They didn't think we were
They
serious.
did think we were really serious, and I look at some of those people in our parish now and kind of chuckle because they joined the church, and I don't blame them. Some people are skeptical in those events, but we did. We had meetings where we had to gather women together and speak to them about the church and what we were going to do, and we had to prove ourselves.
And some of those
didn't believe
people,
that we
Kiki,
were
that,
able to
well,
put it
some of
together.
those people that we were contacting were already, about St. Andrew's
Of course,
members.
this is what I'm saying.
Which stirred the pot even more with George Marks
Right.
and his associates.
We did, but we still had to prove the fact that we really were serious in, propagating the Saints Peter and Paul. That was the whole thing, and I remember going down lists of names, and some of them were Lithuanian. They weren't even Greek, and
Yeah, right.
because we didn't know a lot of the people who were coming out here and settling.
Those were the early missionaries.
That's right, and
That's the
so
mission.
Well, being all of American-born people, did you have a certain attitude toward how you wanted this parish to develop? You've been brought up in churches which were carried on their services and attitudes with primarily men dominating, primarily the Greek language dominating, and clearly, of course, there was a lot of ethnicity involved in the parishes we all grew up in. Was there some difference?
Well, actually, initially, we never thought about it at all. Never even discussed it. We just assumed, we just wanted a church, and we thought it would be the same way as it was in Chicago. The question of having it in English or Greek really never came up.
I don't think that's true at all.
And Father, I think Father Laddle.
How can you say that?
Well, not before we got our charter or anything like that. After Father Laddell came in, then he was the one that really incorporated the English.
There
Almost
were
from the beginning.
the seeds are this were there, man, 'cause we,
The seeds were
yeah,
there.
because one of the
Wait,
things.
please. I will impose my clerical authority and get some order here.
Well, we had a meeting to set fundamentals for the church before any priest came. And we had the standards that we wanted in a priest put down on paper, as I recall.
There are certain things,
What was that, Maria?
There is no place in here where you can find, except as I just read to you, we should go out and buy epistles and gospels in English. That's because we didn't understand. We wouldn't have understood. There's also a reference that was at Hotel Marine to a church that we could relate to. For example, one of the groups said that find a place of worship to perpetuate the Greek Orthodox faith along lines suitable to our generation.
What's the implication of that?
Which was, at that time, I think we all were English speaking.
Language, yeah.
Then when we set up a committee to seek a priest, the committee had instructions as to what kind of a priest we wanted, and among those instructions was that he would be like the rest of us.
In fact, the words, if you'll let me interrupt you, the words are exactly that he be American educated. He be American born, American educated. If he had some graduate work in Greece, that would be fine. But we were looking for an American born and an American educated priest. That's in 1960.
But I don't think any one of us ever had an idea that the liturgy would be performed in English, but it never was. It never had been. How could we have thought of that?
I don't think that was an issue. I don't think that was
I think the document that's in
It was more the
Please, let's take some modesty right now.
Thank you. No, I would say that the document that Leon is reading from probably formulates the thoughts that existed over a period of time and led into that. But I think very much the predominance of English in terms of our thinking was there from the very beginning. I remember something else as we were speculating about priests and so forth, and I don't know if that occurred in the Moraine conference as we talked about someday, beyond that, the possibility of a church, and where, for example, or very early in my recollection, is the idea of an open altar, so that people can see the various activities that the priest is engaged in during, the liturgy, as opposed to what we knew before.
I wanted to ask you about can I just stay on the altar just for a minute? The arrangement of the icons, the iconostasis, and the openness of the altar, I think is very, very fine, just as the best possible adaptation that I've seen of the Orthodox traditional church interior, which allows for a lot of visual contact and relating to the priest and the activities within the altar. Who is responsible for the way the altar looks today? The four icons as they are and everything open on the side. Does anybody remember?
It must be Father
It
Laddell.
has to be Father Laddell. He was coordinating all that.
I would probably say that it's probably the architect.
I don't think the architect, you know what architects do?
Yeah,
This is his first church.
Yes.
And I saw another architect who built his first Greek Orthodox church. He came into an existing Orthodox church, copied it completely, and then went out and made his own with some exterior changes. And I think that's what happened to the architect here. But it must have been Father Laddell.
It was his church
tell you how
and
this
his
came?
way.
I can give you my impression how this came about, except I was on the architectural committee also at that time. When we started the icon screen or the treatment wasn't handled until very, very late in the game, because the interior of the church wasn't designed along with the exterior of the building. And then we had one meeting once when economists said, well, what are we going to do with the icon screen? And we said, well, why don't we just leave it as open as it, so we have the same kind of open feeling that we did at Crow Island, because that's what everybody is probably accustomed to. So then we start out by standing those icons. If you look at some of the early pictures, those icons just stood there by themselves. That was the first treatment. then, when the icon screen as it stands there now was designed, we designed it with that railing at the point where it is. However, if you'll examine that design is such that it can be double in height by putting another layer on the top. Okay. Then secondly, the icons that are closest to the entrance were designed to be strong enough so that if we had to put a gate up, we would do it, because we still thought, you know what, the Archbishop's going to come out here and he's going to say, it's got to be higher, and you got to have a gate. So we were ready for it. In fact, there are probably sketches around where that railing is double tiered. And then the Archbishop came out and he didn't say a thing about it.
Fine.
So to us that was tacit approval of what we had.
And incidentally, as I think we've said before, to have this kind of openness of the altar area is more traditional than having it closed. If you look at the early churches going for maybe for over 1,000 years, there was just a rail up so high, and people had immediate access to the priest, to the altar area. And the closed iconostasis, which we see in most churches, practically all churches today, is a later development of the last maybe 500, 600 years.
So
I
it
believe
came
we were
about
one of the
because
first churches to do this, and subsequent to that, it was copied and started by others throughout.
Well, I think it's
What
a
about
key.
the Frank Lloyd Wright Church in Milwaukee.
Well, yeah, Frank Lloyd Wright was probably the first, but I mean, after, when you get a Greek architect.
Yeah.
But no, I was going to ask Leon, you were on the architectural committee. Yet going into those meetings, wouldn't you say it's true that there was an established trend, direction, attitude expressed by the then existing community to move in the direction of, let's say, English, openness, this kind of thing? I think which influenced an awful lot of decisions relative to the operation of the community as it existed at that time.
But don't forget, it wasn't a problem at that time.
No, and we took it for granted.
It wasn't a problem
you're
at
right.
that time.
What
The
wasn't a
language
problem?
problem was not a problem at that time. In
Well,
fact,
that's not exactly true.
what was
It's
even
not exactly correct.
It isn't?
No, it isn't.
Well, it certainly wasn't one that ever surfaced.
It didn't surface in this parish for some reason, but I can assure you in the rest of the country it was a big issue.
Well, Father Petrus did perform the liturgy in Greek. However, one of the interesting exceptions that took place, that some of you, I'm sure you remember, is that once a month or so, Harry the Monas would compose a chant in English. People remember that?
Yeah.
And then, remember that? And then he would, at the end of the certain liturgy, he'd say, "Today I have a new chant that I would like to chant for you in English." And he would chant in English for us. I thought that was a pretty good indication.
But you know what our problem was? I know Sam Dedes at the time, you remember him, and I chanted on occasion.
Right.
We didn't have anything else to go by. We had to go, and we used choir materials, the music that was already existed, and all of that was in Greek. But while that was reality, I think our attitude and desire was English. It's something that we understand more completely and so forth.
Somewhere along the line, we said to promulgate the Greek Orthodox faith in a language we understand, and we also had we had our little newspaper, by the way. What was the?
We used to go to Bossy's house.
We used to do it in our basement.
It was unique. The newspaper wasn't the Tribune, but it was our community Tribune. It was quite good.
You still have those.
Then we go
The
down.
word of the Lord endureth forever.
Then we go down to their printer.
And then in parentheses, in the language which you understand the most. In this case, is English. And that was the case. It was never an ethnic issue here, and I agree with all of the people here, because it never was a problem. And we had Greek-born brethren amongst us, working right along side by side, never had a problem in that they said, well, gee, I really missed the Greek part of this as it was progressing.
Yeah, but those were our parents, Jim.
We also had the Russian Orthodox
Your
couple.
parents, my parents.
Remember the Russian
That's all
Orthodox
the
couple we
that
had?
were there. My mother loved the church.
We had a Russian Orthodox couple that found it very satisfying.
That was the only non-Greek
Non-Greek.
first, of Greek ancestry.
That we can remember, that I can remember.
Now, one thing I've heard about how Mr. Milonas was picked up every morning, every Sunday morning. Could you relate, whoever did this?
Well, we took
turns.
turns. We took
Tell
turns.
that
Well,
story.
Leon, I'd go, or something.
And the car wouldn't
No,
start.
he lived in
somebody else would
Chicago,
go.
right? And he would, what would he do? How would he get?
He would take the bus.
The
Can
bus.
I- One of the most
Tell the
interesting
story.
things that ever happened to me is that I would, that I don't think I did it every Sunday, but quite often. I guess that was one of the duties of being president, was to pick up the chanter. And in the wintertime, he would get off at the corner of Central and Foster, and he would go stand in the telephone booth. It's all open there. There was no store or anything. One morning, so I was speeding one morning down Eden's Highway, and I got stopped by the police department. And they said, "But she was young, you're going kind of fast." I said, "You'll love her." And I told them why I was speeding, because we had this chanter coming up from the west side, and he's standing in the telephone booth on the corner, and it was very, very cold. That's why. And they let me go. So they got the message. But that was, but poor old Milonas would shiver and shake in the phone booth. But he was a fine man. Just a fine man. But there are certain people like that that really have made contributions that we shouldn't forget, like Petrus. Because he did. I mean, he did. He would have come, if even they told him not to come, he would have still come.
Is he still alive?
Is he still alive?
I don't think so. I don't really know if he is or not.
I haven't seen his name.
And then today, when you were having memorial service, that one white box there is the altar, is the original altar that Jim Cardis made that we were using on Crow Island, and it was left open in the back because we would take everything up and everything and put it in the back of the that cart, which is on wheels, and wheel it back behind stage. And one of the pulpits that not pulpit, you used to put an icon on, lectern that's still back there, that was the one that Jim
Oh, that big
made
wooden.
stand. Right, so there are people.
And all the women would contribute all their candlesticks. We had nothing. You know,
That's right.
I mean, and everything. My candlesticks, I can't get the.
Dusty Garris, you brought the.
We still have all the
Does he still
candles. You
do that?
can't get it off.
Or is
We had
it-
nothing.
he's not in
We had to
that
cart everything. You know, everything.
You also like to know that I still have the first pair of icons that were permanent on our altar. You know, because I didn't give them to Father. Did I?
Father.
I did give them to you, and that was because Father Nestor had to have his icons back at a given point. So I went down to Halsted Street and got these icons from one of the stores down there, but the Virgin Mary turned out to be a Catholic icon. As you
See
pointed
how
out,
knowledgeable we were?
right? Those were the icons.
It goes to show you none of us could tell though.
So you have
30 years later it comes out, 25.
Okay.
We had to borrow a baptismal font,
Oh,
excuse me.
yeah.
Tell 'em that
Go and
story.
clean out all the grease, etc., and bring them, because it
Borrowed
was in
from.
the archives of St. James, and then run it back to the church. We were a portable church, and very flexible, and we'd stick things behind the screens, and
Fill it up with water.
we had a
Baptismal
candle
font
stand.
came
It
from
was
the,
really beautiful.
Jim, the baptismal font was the one that we
The original
borrowed
one came from St. James.
from the diocese.
Diocese. Don't you remember the one time
Was
we
it
went
diocese? I
back
thought it was St.
dirty
James.
and we got into a lot of trouble and they said we
And,
could never have it back
and I
again because
can't remember the name of the layman that worked for.
as a matter of fact, I'm not even sure
I
that the
think it's
bishop knew
Mal-
we used to
Mal-
get
there was
it.
not,
And that
Milonas
man
was
got
gone.
into
There was
trouble.
another bishop after that.
Millet.
Meletius.
Yes.
Okay, and he didn't want it loaned out, but this other gentleman, the lay person there, was kind enough to sneak it out for us. Now, the thing that came up one night couple of months ago, if you recall, we were talking about that baptismal font and how we got caught because we didn't clean it as thoroughly as we should have, and there was a little bit of oil, a little bit of hair left in the bottom. And the bishop went up there and looked at the baptismal font, and really, he gave the dickens to the poor lay fellow. And it's interesting, but that was the meeting when Jim Limper said that they had baptized one of their children in that baptismal font. Huh? Wasn't that?
Yeah.
Weren't you at that meeting when Jim Limper said that?
Yes.
And think Blakakis was the first to be baptized.
Well, there were, it seems to me then we were
She
conducting,
was baptized in '63.
Oh, yeah, she, oh, no, that was
Oh,
later.
we were before that.
but Father, it would be interesting to know whether or not we held baptismal services before we received our charter. I think we did.
Oh,
I wonder.
As we held our first wedding before we received our charter, which is a
We,
story.
do we really want to know? Do we really want to know? Does
Maybe
that
that
do
couple
anything?
I'm married.
You know, we all forgot one other thing. We forgot we used to have a little church here in Glenview for a while, remember?
That's right.
You like to
By Our Lady of
Was
Perpetual
that
Help.
after, that was after the, no, that was before the
before.
charter
What was
too.
that?
That's right, because that was one of the
Right
things
where
they
the
told us
chapel.
we had to have a church to get
Our
a
Lady of
charter.
Perpetual Help, the Catholic Church had a small chapel.
Where?
Right on,
Right next to
right off of
That was
Right
their
on the
original,
Street.
that was their original sanctuary.
right next to where their church is now.
Yeah.
The school is staying there now. There used to be a wooden chapel there.
White
and
frame.
We went in there, a white frame wooden chapel. We went in there, we built a iconostasis. Remember one Saturday we went there, we was the carpenters and we built an iconostasis in there and everything.
We painted that
We
white.
painted that,
Yeah.
that's correct.
We, can you
What was,
remember why we got that thing over
Yeah.
here? That's the time we started trying to get Father Lato assigned here. And I had met Father Lato in New York City. He came up from Savannah and I went from here. And he got in to see the Archbishop while I waited over at the Metropolitan Art Museum. And he came back out and he had a little piece of paper. And he told Father Lato, tell them that they were not going to assign priests under the conditions that they're operating under. And he gave him 3 conditions. One was that we have to show that we can pay a salary. Second is we have a bona fide budget. And thirdly, that we have a permanent altar. He didn't believe we should pick up your altar and
Roll it away.
roll it away. Okay, and that little piece of paper is probably in your files, because I have a Xerox copy of it in the Archbishop's handwriting. So that's when Father Latta said, "You got a problem." So the following, when I got back to Chicago, someone, I don't remember who it was, told us about this tiny little original, it was a Protestant church right next to the Holy Name Catholic Church over there. Our Lady of Perpetual Help. And that it was being used as a Sunday school classroom, so I thought, what the heck,
Father
nothing to lose.
Desmond, did he
So
call?
I went over, I went over.
He called somebody, Father Desmond,
Father Desmond.
knew about us. Were we having Greek school classes in that little other
I didn't
building
know
at
Father
that time?
Desmond from Adam at that time.
No,
but
Well, he knew of our group. I don't know
I
how.
had worked with Father Desmond
Were you
a lot.
maybe that
and,
was it.
And I saw the church, this little it
Maybe
was a
that's what he-
Protestant, it belonged to the Catholic Church, but they bought it from the Protestant group. And he said, I see your church is boarded up for the most part, meaning the little frame thing. And he said, yes. And I said, well, don't you know we're renting facilities and we don't have a permanent church. He says, then why don't you use it? And not that it's a big deal, it was just a friendship between he and I. And that's where it was. But
And then he
says
told
it's
us we
appalling,
could
and he
carry
took
it
me
away,
over there.
I think
remember?
that
We
was
could take
before I
it
went
even.
over there, because I went over there
Then
Put it on-
Father Desmond.
we went to
on
the
our
board
land.
meeting
and
and
asked
came
him,
up.
I went over to the parish house over
Yeah.
there and asked to see Father Desmond and asked him, could we use it? And he said, I'll do better than that, I'll give it
That's
to
right.
you. So we went over to the nuns there, and he said, give Mr. Scan the key, we've just given them the little building.
He gave us the classrooms too in the
Okay.
community center as
And then
well.
said that, but he said under the condition that when we start expanding the Sunday school, if you've got to pick it up and move it, if you want it as your church building. And then it was the following weekend that we called out Nick Canellis and Pete Christopoulos and Stosh Christopoulos, at least that I remember those 3, and they came out and put together an icon screen just over a weekend. And then everybody got out there that same weekend and washed the place down.
Right.
Remember, because it was just dirty inside. Everybody scrubbed it and washed the
That
walls
form
down.
was known as the permanent altar.
We put together,
That qualified.
that was our permanent altar, so we were able to meet that condition. Then we were able to go back and say, we had a permanent altar. Of course, we didn't tell him all the details that church was going to be.
Any more than Tom Athens told the whole truth about Winnetka.
No, we just didn't tell them, because at that time, we even considered the possibility of moving it if we had to.
Yes, but
Did you have a treasury at that time?
Sure. Now, I've heard the name St. David brought up on some occasion. What happened?
Meeting, we had Manzoro's was the one that, Peter Manzoro's, was the one that arranged for us to meet and have our meetings there, but we never used this church as such.
With one exception for our wedding.
The wedding.
Yeah, the one wedding.
But we held our board meetings there.
Our board meetings, the men's club, the men's club meetings originally weren't they held there? And then our board meetings, because he was friendly with the priest.
This was early on, I think before all of these other events took place, when they were trying to get members and...
When that cut off,
No, in
No, St.
Glenview,
David is in
we'd
Glenview.
meet,
That was
we'd
real
have,
early, wasn't it?
board meetings of a church that more than the other church.
That didn't exist.
Now, the first, do people remember where the first office of the church was?
Sure, up above the Glenview.
No.
No.
The first
We used
office,
your
first
home
office,
Oh, that was your
Jim and I
room.
went and
That's
got it, was,
right.
no, it was in the
Wilmette.
building in downtown Wilmette, Jimmy.
Oh, you're right,
Upstairs.
yes.
Oh, I thought
Where
it
was
was in
this?
Glenview.
What's that building?
Wilmette, on Wilmette Avenue.
That's right.
And it was just a little dingy thing, and then we went to a little larger dingy
And then
thing.
we had that English lady working for
Yeah,
us.
that's
Yeah.
right.
That was the
My
first
goodness.
office.
memory.
But then when we decided to locate over this way, we decided, about the same time we were buying this property, we decided that we ought to have a Glenview address, and that's why we moved over to downtown. Glenview.
Yeah, I forgot about the
When did we start the Greek school?
When
Was
did we
that
start the
much
women's
later?
club?
58.
Oh, the women's club started
Well, Kiki, you were the first president of the Women's
58,
Club.
you know.
58. Was it 1958 that you were
Oh,
president?
yeah, I think so.
We did it.
So there was a women's club, and you were president of it
For
And a
years.
2
men's
years before there
club.
was a charter.
Oh,
right?
yeah, oh, sure.
And you know where we held the first meeting of the really first meeting of without a charter? Mary Lou Cambaras's basement. That's where we elected the officers.
Yes,
Remember
sure,
that?
I remember.
And we had,
Because the first,
no.
yeah, because that
They
paralleled the
That was
first
That was
first
out in the yard.
men's
that was
organization,
something
which
else.
was the men's club.
Well, can you tell us something about the beginning? A little bit more about the people who were
beginning?
involved of the Women's Club, yes. What was your intentional purpose, your original purpose?
To raise money.
To raise
Yeah, raise money.
Right.
Period.
We were just like the men. We were all over the place to begin with, but
Get members.
the very first meeting again was held in our backyard, Peter's and my home.
We used to hold fairs in that place in Wilmette, dances.
The Wilmette
The women's club.
No, the Masonic
Masonic
Temple.
Temple.
Right. The only thing we held at the Women's Club was the
Oh,
first
the bazaar.
We
Oh.
used to have bazaars, and the girls used
Well-
to have dances, and
It was,
But we started.
anything to raise money.
We started in about '58, and I remember
think
that
so.
it was in our backyard. It was
Mhm.
And then when we had a few, what do you call them? They were like teas and coffees to,
Get
and invited all the women. And
Membership.
Mary Vosnos was very, very involved at that time in donating her place of business after hours because we couldn't afford to do anything. And then after each meeting that we had, I remember that's when we really got to know Martha's best.
Well, one thing strikes me is that you all had small children,
That's
very
right.
small.
very
Some
small.
had
Right.
babies. didn't they?
And
And you were
some of
all
them were having
extremely
babies right
busy.
along.
Very, because we had parents, my parents.
Active.
Or we brought
We were
our
a
children.
we were indeed a family, believe me, we were a family.
We certainly were.
Is that the
It's
sense
beautiful.
you had there?
And we,
Oh, yes.
we had a lot of trouble getting people to attend our fairs, to
Oh,
prove
yeah.
ourselves that
Prove
we
ourselves.
we gave our bazaar and we killed ourselves. Our first bazaar I was chairman.
Yeah,
And I remember we
we
killed
made
ourselves
everything.
making everything.
And then we had to
And
buy it
we
all back.
rented the Wilmette Women's Club and nobody came.
Oh, that
It
was
was
a
just
disaster
we
that
had no
day.
credibility. Nobody knew who we were. And every Sunday I would bring all the things to the Crow Island and
We
would
sold
and week after week we would bring them and finally everything sold.
We had a good time, though. That was
Yeah, we had a good time.
And our
That was
first
enjoyable.
fashion show was the same way. We struggled and called. We were on the phone for hours.
We
asking,
had our
begging people to come.
first dinner dance.
Tam
I don't know whether
Tam
that was
O'Shanter.
before or after
Tam
the Tam
O'Shanter.
O'Shanter Country Club.
Wasn't
We
Jim
had
Gallus the
one
chair-
thing
yeah.
at
Yeah,
the,
chairperson that year.
what do you call it, on Lincoln or Crawford Avenue, because I
Oh,
remember
that
they're all
was a
washing
square
dishes in the
dance.
back, yeah.
That was a square dance.
That was,
that
oh,
was-
VFW place, that's where it was, that was a long
On
time
our
ago.
first dinner dance, I'll never forget it, at Tam O'Shanter. I was so busy that night that somebody told me I won something. And I won my first Weber barbecue. And I started to leave, and the fellow come running after me. The man who was taking care of them. Well, he wasn't a manager, I guess he was a maitre d' or whatever he was. He said, "Don't leave that thing here." I said, "What thing?" He says, "That thing you won." And I wasn't interested in it. Really, I wasn't, because I was so busy. But that's what got me started in barbecuing.
Beautiful note.
Now the area out here is very well populated at the time, right now. How did it look then? How did it look? Now we know that before this parish, the church itself was built. It was finished and opened in November 1964, November 15, 1964. What existed in this place before?
Nothing.
Nothing.
This was owned by the Wagner family
Yeah.
This was
for over 125 years, part of their farm. They owned much of the property that where houses are built along Lake Avenue near the forest preserve. And the Wagners had at one time sold it and had bought it back.
I think they defaulted the first year. They defaulted.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same person who's here today, Peter Wagner. Was he the one that you were dealing with back
Right.
then?
Yes, he was.
Was his parents
were
living
other
or anything?
stories.
No,
Two sisters.
Two
Just the two
spinster sisters. We used to follow him when he'd go into his barn while he's milking his cows, trying to negotiate the purchase of his property, and he'd keep going up. And I shall never forget Father Lalo. The only time I ever saw him get so angry, after we had met with him, and there was a series of meetings. He just had to follow him around. He had these little kerosene lamps.
Yeah, he had
in
no
his place.
electricity.
He just he would charge if you wanted to. His relatives have said that he was really a miser, charge him for the cow manure he'd sell him, you know. And at a certain point, we thought we had him negotiating seriously with us, and he said, "Well, no, I think the price should be something." I can't remember.
10,000 more.
More, yeah. And Father Leather, when we came out, says, "Yanthropus." But but he kept telling him, he says, "Look, Pete, we want to put a church on there. We don't want to put a tavern. We don't want to put a department store." And we just couldn't get this man. He was very difficult. We finally had to pay his lawyer's fees.
No, his lawyer finally, and let's not forget, because George played a big. George and Pete were buddies. I mean, I think it's highly possible that if it hadn't been for George going over there every Saturday morning to have homemade apple pie with the sisters and listening to Pete,
Step in that
it
dog
might not have
do.
gone through.
Supreme sacrifice.
Yeah.
But at that time, when we had negotiated, he tried to back out, and we told his lawyer that we were going to sue.
Didn't you tell them, Peter? Weren't you
And
talking to the lawyer?
Peter was a lawyer.
He was probably
Okay.
the lawyer.
But it was his law. It was Wagner's lawyer that told him, "Look, you made a deal.
yes.
You got to
Remember his
sell,
name, Joe
right?"
Goodorf or whatever?
Ah,
Peter
Peter
coming home and telling me.
Peter Wagner was always reluctant to give
Part
up
with
the
anything.
property or part with anything. And he did not want to go through with the transaction, and his lawyer was an honorable old gentleman. Really is the one who told Wagner, "You've got to go. You've made your agreement with these people, and you're going to go through with it."
It belonged to Lucy anyhow, didn't it?
We had a contract.
Well, it wasn't just oral.
Tell the story
about how you
We had
felt,
one obstacle.
how you felt after you signed the contract. I know you.
We felt, well, I do remember, because I was president at that time, I do remember George and I standing out here on the corner, because it seems, I mean, we had given them all the cash that we had as earnest money, as $7,000, $8,000, something like that. $10,000, and we didn't have hardly anything left at all. And then George and I are standing out here on this corner, and I do remember vividly, we're looking at each other and asking each other, do we understand what we had done? And and the commitment we had made, because
There was in the church not full agreement as to what our goals should be with respect to property. There were a group of people who preferred that we begin in a storefront location on Green Bay Road. They thought that $96,000 was too much money to commit to small communities.
Well,
See, to this
the
day-
other group was Gus Chigueras and Ted Feifless were involved in that other group, and they logically didn't think we should stick our necks out that far.
But here it is, the truth comes out after all these years. You two guys, you and George, standing on the corner looking at each other and saying, did we do the right thing? Yet when you came to that meeting, that's what we ought to do.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I said, did we really realize what we had just...
Well, that suggests that there was some question. Do you realize, there's a little implication.
That's roughly the equivalent.
But
that's roughly the equivalent of what hath God wrought.
That's okay.
There were a number of other properties too that came under fairly close consideration.
Why did you pick this particular site? What was the reason you picked this particular site?
Well, remember the one on Arms
Well,
Road?
first of all, we had agreed for the Archdiocese in St. Andrews that we would be within a mile of the intersection of Hibbard and Lake. Okay, we would go no closer to them. And then there were several pieces of property. There was the one on the southeast corner of Hibbard and Lake.
There's a church there now.
And then there's the other one up at Illinois Road in Hibbard that we were looking at, and this one that we were looking at.
What about on Harm?
Oh, that's right. I hear the...
A piece of property on Harm.
The one below here, but that was much smaller than this one.
Right,
Do you feel like you chose the right place?
Oh, yes,
Absolutely.
We hadn't signed the paper, we were talking about the other 2.5 acres just to the north of us, and we hadn't even signed this paper.
That was
progressive
Scan and
this group
Rafael
was.
again.
First, Rafael and Scan set us up.
I say that kid
With
was
a positive
very
note.
visionary at the time. And I say that from this standpoint, just starting, a job, mortgage, family, kids, and all of a sudden, here comes an obligation, and you listen to individuals that say, hey, someday this is going to be a thriving, community. Now's the time to buy the land because 10, 15, 20 years from now, it's going to be double, triple, whatever it is. Try to build a church then. And then on the other side, there were people who were a little, more conservative about things and what have you. But I think in terms of the way it turned out, that was a fortuitous decision to do what we did. And I think you're right.
And it was built on a feasibility growth pattern. They had all the statistics, the compute sheets. And this is where we are now, in 10 years here, and 20, and it was right on the
We
button.
had, George and I sat down and we projected. We got all the projection figures for all the communities in this area, and then we had to guesstimate how many Greek families there would be. We made certain assumptions, and based on the growth, we estimated that we would be going to like 435 families within 10 years. I think it was 1972 or something like that. I still have that report. It's a very interesting one. And we projected 435 families, how many square feet per adult you need, church attendance, how many kids would be in Sunday school based on church attendance, because those statistics are they are available. And then we took all of these statistics, these assumptions, and we came up with a figure of the size of a building we should have. It's size
Do you
of a church
remember what
building.
we put in a time
Yeah.
capsule out here?
Yeah,
when
and
we
then
opened
based
that
on the
function?
size of the church building, we decided we needed a healthy piece of property. So, and it was that kind of logical process that converted the other group over, and that happened at the night that we had a little general assembly meeting, and we held it, to my recollection, in the little church building over
That's right, yeah.
in Glenview, our old frame church building. And we made they made their argument, we made our argument, that Ted Feifus, who was the most adamant of the bunch, stood up and he said, I believe you people are right. And he swung over, huh?
I don't
I
remember.
don't
He swung
remember.
over and then they all agreed. And that was generally unanimous opinion to go.
By the way, you might also say that all these gentlemen that began in this area, they donated their time, energy, money,
Wives.
everything.
Wives.
Everything. We didn't have any discussion about fees or not any.
But lest you forget, it's the women who put the person hours in that
Well,
got us off the path.
But that's the same donation-wise. I mean,
Yeah.
you're
We
listening
have
to
to
Leon
give due
speaking
credit.
about projections and things, and my
Well-
husband's time and Jim's time and Tom's time and everything was
Peter, I like to say
all this
something.
time in setting up all the legal documents.
everything.
I like to say something at this point, because I think originally, though, when we started this church, we never envisioned the church being this large. If you
No.
people will recall, we had the idea that we would have small churches, and we were even thinking about building another church in Libertyville, if you recall.
Helping them
We said we
build
just want a
something.
small church so the parish priest could get to know everybody and have a nice, small, family-type community. Well, this was all changed, though, really, with Father Lano.
I don't
When
think so,
Father-
Jim. I think that from the beginning we figured about 400 families with the idea that we would encourage others to.
Well, at the moment, though, Peter, we have a little over 700 on our mailing list.
Okay.
And we're
Now,
not.
they're not all families, but clearly this is a lot larger than what you originally envisioned.
Yeah, but the church, I think, is planned for 400.
435 families.
Yes, but
I think that's
But
what
now-
where did
small.
where did the change in thinking come from?
Well,
I
I'm
think
excused,
the real
but the change there has really been no fundamental change in
No.
thinking.
Well, there
Because I
must have
think
been,
everyone
because
will agree
there's
that
no one saying let's
whoever
stay at
mentioned it,
400.
that from the beginning, we thought that this would be, we would establish this church, and our next job would be to go help another church get started.
After reaching a
Right,
certain
that's what
point.
you just
so-
said.
But when you reach 400, you didn't do that.
It got to be too expensive.
Well, I think the economic reality began to set in, an awareness of what it took to operate things, and the first 5 years, the first 10 years, there was no desire on anybody's part to do anything except maintain what we had started, at least around here, and I think that was a general attitude in the community that we knew at that time. Now, when I'm not sure at this point, as I think back, and I may be, I may not be accurate, but as of this moment, I'm not sure that there ever was really a serious, when I say serious, effort to do anything except maintain what we have. There's been talk, but I think in the final analysis, I distinguish, chit-chat from a group sitting down and putting up money, looking at alternatives, this kind of thing. And I know that there was the former, but not the latter. So I'm not sure that.
Well, with what there is one exception.
There is.
This one, that group wanted to split off and go start their own church, and we're meeting up there in Northbrook or Northfield, wherever they were meeting. That one or two, I think there was
somebody
even
meeting?
2 of us that did go up there, and because I was on the board at that time, the board knew it, and I asked them to come back. That if they would come back, we would form a committee, and we would immediately begin to think about building a church. And they did not.
You mean another one?
I did go there.
But that one,
Another
much
one,
later though,
It
wasn't
was
it?
much later.
It was after Father
No,
Lano.
that was, oh yeah.
That was in
Father
76,
Lano. But how-
77.
That still was 7, 8 years ago.
You had a question?
Well, I think that once this building went up and this parish was in debt to the tune of $750,000, there wasn't a movement to break off and say, okay, I mean, they had a big obligation facing them. And maybe it was at that point that the membership was about at the point that you discussed. It was probably $450 when we came here. Is that correct, Bill?
Well, they borrowed $750,000.
No, the membership.
Oh, yes, yes.
Around $450, but we also came here at the time when this building went up. So it didn't seem to me that there was any feeling of cutting off and starting elsewhere since this obligation was facing everyone.
It was the right time as far as the size was, but economically it was certainly not the right time.
Community center that tilted the balance.
Is what happened here any much more different than what happens with most new churches? Isn't the same process, the same evolution?
I think there's a lot to what you say, that in order to get started, you do need a lot of money. And you make a lot of commitments borrowing. And that, in a way, determines just how magnanimous you feel about starting up parishes. Clearly, when $750,000 were borrowed from the bank to build this building, that put a heavy burden on the life of the parish and meant that they could not be thinking about diverting funds in other ways because it would be financial suicide. Well, I want to get back to one thing here. I understand that there was a question in the early years, in the early 60s, whether to build a church building first or a community center.
Yes, there certainly
No
was.
question about it.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I recall we were meeting, I recall it vividly because at that time I was strongly in favor of building the community center first instead of the church. And my point was at that time that look at all your Catholic churches in the city of Chicago. They always built that because you could use that every day of the week, while a church you could only use one day a week. But I got into we were meeting at the Tiffany restaurant in Gulf Mills Shopping Center, and with Father Latto there, and I remember getting into a big argument with Father Latto, to the point where I resigned from the board after that, to be honest about it, and I became inactive. But I was strongly in favor of building the community center first. Well, my wishes didn't prevail. Obviously, Father Latto had a lot more support than I did. And
Jim,
I think early on...
there was another factor. I mean, unless you want to speak to
I was just going to say, I think that early on we decided that even before the church was thought about, and before Father Latto came here at one of these meetings, I think we decided that the religious aspect was the most important to the church had to come first. It wasn't the latter-day argument. It was one of the early.
No, I have to disagree with you because I'll tell you what happened that night. I met with 4 or 5 other people that were the same thinking as I was. I remember there was Tom Kavouris at that meeting with me. We met before the board meeting, specifically to push the building of the community center first. And I was very disenchanted that night because, well, we lost out, to be honest about it. And what really hurt me the most was that these people that were supposedly following me abandoned me. Father Latto was able to convince them that the church would come first.
Father Latto, but there were.
So I remember that quite
others
vividly.
there, Jim, that felt. There were others that felt the way I felt the same way too. But we had seen evidence from one of the things that influenced us is we had seen evidence of people starting community centers and then taking too long to start a church building proper. We had just, for example, we had gone to Detroit to visit churches, and there was at least one church in Detroit that had put a community center in and was waiting. There was one that had just put a basement in, and they'd covered it up.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and they were meeting in the basement. You know, and we felt like our principal duty was to put up a place of worship.
See, my argument at that time was it's a lot more easier for you to raise money for a church building than it is for a community center, because you can always get people to donate for pews, stained glass windows, altars, and things like that. But to get money for community, community center is a little more different.
What was the time differential between the church and then the Centerville.
10 years. The
Was it
church
was it that long?
The church was finished in November 1915, 1964. This building was well, not consecrated, but open, dedicated in October 1974, 10 years later.
It
I
doesn't
didn't
seem like
realize it was that.
Actually, when you think about it, that's fast. Because most communities takes them more than 10 years to get both.
Well, Father Latto, they wanted to
Well, it
finish
shows
it out
the
well.
dedication.
Yeah.
That's true.
So they really
That
pushed
was
it.
kind of an emotional
Yeah.
That's right. It was pushed.
decision.
Now, when I came here, there seemed to have been, incidentally, today marks the beginning of my 12th year here.
Oh, congratulations.
Agent Ted and I came, and our first liturgy was the second Sunday of February. In fact, it was the 10th of February, 1974. So this concludes 11 and begins the 12th year.
Fernanda Tapronia.
You were a little boy when I came. It seems to me, maybe I'm wrong, but I had the impression there was a kind of an attitude on the part of some church officials or authorities that there's just kind of rebels here. Somehow, you weren't you weren't following the party line completely. Maybe I was mistaken in that, but do you have any thoughts on anybody?
We've been called rebels before. I don't know that when you define it semantically, whether a rebel is because you're progressive and aren't going to take no for an answer is in fact the point of being a rebel. And I think we were more dedicated and so enthusiastic. It was an emotional thing involved with a lot of rationale. And anybody that steps out of the line, which is considered the norm in building churches, if this is the case, is always the rebel. But uniquely enough, we were pioneers trying to build something that we needed greatly. And some of us got so involved that it was part of our whole lifestyle. And when you can look in terms of some of the old-timers of the boards over the years, and you still see people coming around, and the Leon Scans that have never let go of the reins, I think this is what's important. And of course, Peter, and I really mean all of you. I thought of Leon just now because there was a time when somebody criticized Leon Scan as a president, and I wanted to go on the record. And why is it? Because he was too religious. He was too devout, and he should have had more in terms of socials. And after all, what is this all about? And I can
I've been accused of that too.
Yeah, right. And it's these little things that make the impression. No, we weren't rebels. We were just hard-working Orthodox Christians, and we loved each other.
I believe that perhaps came about as a result of the manner in which we were determined to set up a church here by other members of other parishes. For instance, people in St. Andrews, some in St. Demetrius, particularly the ones around us. And we were determined to have this project put up, completed, and then maybe in their eyes, when we were soliciting the assistance of others and trying to get them to become part of our community, well, you a rebel group, I had heard that. You people, and perhaps that's where it came from.
Well, one thing is the English character, English language character of this parish was established very early.
No question about it.
In fact, that was one of the things which actually helped determine my acceptance to come here, because it was English-oriented and the whole lifestyle was such. And so I came to something which existed years ago. Now, I've heard the comment made that this people here became so English-oriented that they actually were indifferent to or even antagonistic to their cultural heritage. Now, is that the way you people remember anything like that?
No.
Why did we set up a
No.
Greek school then and send our children to Greek school?
No, I don't think, certainly not with the founders and the people who were originally here. Perhaps a few people later on might have had something like that in mind, because basically what we were interested in is starting a church that was traditional, but one, as we said, has
been said here this evening, that we could understand, our children can understand.
And for which
relate to.
and for which there is historical precedent. I don't think we can forget that. Because we looked at, I think all of us at one time or another had an opportunity to look at our ecclesiastical history. And if you look at that, we're all over Eastern Europe. What is it? The Greek that spread, or was it was it Orthodoxy in the language of the land? And very frankly, some of us looked at that and say, why does it have to be Greek or all Greek? Why can't it be English?
It's a common trap that a lot of people fall into. The use of English is interpreted as a dislike for Greek. It is not at all that way, but that's the trap that a lot of thinking falls into. It still is happening today. Father and I circulate around other parishes in the city, and we're always hearing something of that thought, that the use of English somehow presupposes we dislike Greek. You know, it doesn't necessarily follow that way, but that is a...
That's an interesting impression, because I'm sure that none of us really feel that ourselves.
No, and I don't...
Quite the opposite,
and
I imagine.
spend a lot of time trying to fight that. I point out that this parish, and then built into that is, oh, you want to forget your Greek heritage, you've moved to the suburbs, you try to become like the American people in your area. But this parish has held that, quote, Greek picnic for 16 years, is it? Is it in its 17th year? They, more than that, make a big point of serving the ethnic foods, playing the ethnic music of their people. They have made no attempt to hide their ethnic roots.
I think you have to add to that a number of individuals that I think one would classify as community leaders, that's putting it modestly, have been very much in the forefront of trying to further Greek interests in the American community. So I don't see how that can be laid to us.
In the early years, I don't know that we were just doing what seemed to come naturally. When Father Petrovus was here, he did everything in Greek, and that was accepted. And later on, Father Lado came in, and he did what he thought was right, and that was accepted.
But is he the one who established the English character of the parish?
Yes. He
I
felt
don't
the
know.
need.
I think
I
the
don't
English,
think that anybody would have fought.
the English,
I don't think anyone would have fought what the priest had wanted to do. Father Lado had done it otherwise. His parish would have been loyal to him.
well,
We just
excuse me, Greek, English was our language. I mean, that's basically English was our language. If you look at the early correspondence with the Archdiocese, the first few letters we even received from the Archbishop himself were in Greek. We could not translate them. And then there came a point when we told him we couldn't read his Greek, and from then on, the correspondence, if you check the files, is all in English.
As a matter of fact, I've looked at the files of the parish from the very beginning, from '59, and to my knowledge, everything is in English. I don't find anything
We couldn't understand it.
we didn't know any different.
I think we have to be a little bit careful on this point. To say that we backed into a tradition of English is not really, I think, basically what happened. I think that was done by design. That is, the intent of the community at the time was to move in that direction, and we were accepting of that fact. And I think it established, it put a stamp on the community. To say it was this, then we evolved into that, now if we go back to this, I don't think that that's what, what we're saying at all. I think what we're saying is from the word go, when we were together as a group and had visions, and, we talked to each other about those visions, it was, as we've described it here, English so that people understood, openness so people can see, and certainly sensitivity so people would really understand what was happening. We would be sensitive to each other.
But Ted, I don't know if we knew that the Archdiocese would allow us to have English.
That didn't make,
no church.
but that's exactly my point, that there were enough people who felt that so strongly, they moved forward.
Yeah, but I think Father Latta was the one that came in and realized the need, and then he said yes.
Reinforced it.
Or
Reinforced it, maybe.
reinforced.
You know, he stiffened our backbones,
But prior to that, we didn't know if.
but we were not afraid of that totally. We were
I don't
concerned
think it
about
ever
it.
came out.
But we
I
were
don't think we were ever concerned about
I
that.
think that's the point I'm trying to make, because I think
English was our language.
That's it. We just,
Promulgate the
it
faith.
pointed the
What
ship
was
in
there.
a particular
It was always
direction.
the basis
I
of
think
the
that Ted is
community.
probably right. I think he gets the sense of the original group.
Well, Ted, you referred to the visions.
Well, the
Now
vision,
that 25 years have passed, how do you like the way your baby has developed? You gave birth to a parish. You were instrumental, you people, in the birth of an Orthodox Christian parish, whose 25th anniversary we celebrate this year. So you have a pretty good amount of time to look back on and to see, you look at the way things were, what your visions were, you see how we are today. How would you like to reflect on it?
Well, I like this.
Tom had his hand up. Good.
Glad you brought that up, Father. As one of the founding fathers of this beautiful church community, I personally was very upset at the trend, the events that happened, particularly after the death of Father Latta. The whole community just seemed to splinter. That wonderful feeling, that fellowship, that love, that understanding, the visions just seemed to have crumbled in my mind. Also, I was approached a number of times and said, now look, you're one of the founding fathers, go in there, and one group would call me, another group would call me, and I adopted this attitude. I said, no, I refuse to become part of any group. I says, I worked very hard for a number of years to help establish this community. I says, please leave me alone. All I want to do is come and pray to God. In the edifice that I became so close to. And that is the thing that really hurt me personally. And for that reason, you may say right or wrong, I think I counseled with myself, and I said, I wasn't going to become part of anybody. If a group, if you're a true Christian, you just come and you worship in the house that I was so engrossed in originally. So that is where I have come with this community. I still love the community. I'll still do anything for the community. But it just made me back off. Of course, I have been in recent years, since then, more active in on the diocese and the archdiocese level. I've been very busy and active. In fact, right now, I don't know if everybody's aware of this new Leadership 100 program that we're undertaking. I'm happy to report that we have 26 people that have committed to give our church $100,000 over a period of basis, either pay it immediately or pay it on the basis of $10,000 a year over 10 years. Our goal is 100. But I haven't left my church completely, and maybe I haven't been around.
Well, it is coincidental that the year 1974 was the invasion of Cyprus, the establishment of UHAC, and other things like that. And you and your brother have been very active in that.
Took a lot of my time.
Yes, Ted?
well, I would say probably one would have to treat that as an episode as opposed to when you look at year one and look at 25 years later, and then let's look 50 years later. I'm not so sure over a period of time that there may be other things like that where we have our ups, ups and our downs. When I look down the road, there's some general things and I think some specific things. I think we're all very pleased in terms, or at least from my perspective, very pleased that we see a community center, a church, and a lot of the related, things in place. Probably now, we like to see debt removed, get that out from under, so that we can, breathe a little easier, be a little bit more comfortable. But in terms of some of the other issues, I think back in the days when we were talking about priest and we sat down and developed a list, I'm very happy about the fact that the priest of this parish is very much, is very well known in the community, is a part of, some of the civic organizations, both charitable and civic, that is recognized, by name, and is a real representative in terms of the community that this, that this clergyman represents. And that's the first time in my experience that, that I've come to that realization. So that's, that's a real accomplishment. The fact that he speaks, English, and so on. What I look at from a little different standpoint, and it may not be related to this parish, I get a little bit annoyed at what appears to be a real connection between the religious institution in this country and the government of a foreign power, one that we're very familiar with, and apparently the influence that goes back and forth. I'd like to be, I'm visionary enough that someday there will be an American Orthodox church with American-born bishops, and not necessarily, celibate in the process, an adaptation to what appears to be in American culture. So if we're talking about vision and where we're going to go, it's more than, I think it's more than the building of a, community center, the paying of debt, but where are we going to go as a group? I don't know very many parishes that have that potential. I think that potential, exists here. Now, whether we agree that it's good or, good or bad, that's, very debatable. But the creation of something American, adapted to the American culture, probably in the long run is going to test the standards that I put out by time, as opposed to maybe some of the things that exist. That's just a point of view.
So a general impression of the parish growth and parish facilities and life and so forth is.
I think we've got to seriously think about. We had established some standards, 400 families in terms of community, single priests. Now we've got 700. How do you administer to all of that and do it well? So the whole qualitative element is out in front of us. And I see that maybe with the elimination of debt and so on, and the reallocation of resources, you get into the human services that very much the church should very much be involved in. So let's distinguish between the services and our vision of the future.